My name's Mike Cashman. Please tell me if you think you know why the COVID situation in the UK is not going to get much, much worse. And I'll tell you why I think it is. And there's some simple maths applying here. Now, COVID cases are growing exponentially all the time. Those who have defended the relaxation of restrictions have said, but the ratio of hospitalizations to cases is much lower. The ratio of deaths to hospitalizations is much lower. The clue lies in that word ratio, because this, as I say, is where the simple maths comes in. If there is, which is reasonable to suppose, a standard ratio now that is reasonably reliable, in our new circumstances, a lower ratio of hospitalizations to cases and of deaths to hospitalizations, never mind what it is, there is a ratio. That means they are proportional. Now, if the cases are increasing exponentially, that means the things that are proportional to them will increase exponentially. Yes, from a much lower base. Don't be misled by those graphs that show cases going up rapidly and hospitalizations and deaths going up less rapidly. Hospitalizations lag cases by about 2 weeks. Deaths lag hospitalizations by another 2 weeks. So in that graph that showed cases rising much more rapidly, they started at the same point in time, which means cases had a 4-week start. So shift the lower graphs to the left and you would see that the comparative increase is actually fairly similar. Hospitalizations do in fact seem to be doubling. Look at The Guardian today, I think, Tuesday. I work in an NHS COVID ward and I feel so angry. The government just hit the accelerator pedal all the way, floored it. All the restrictions gone. And one thing about this accelerator pedal, unlike a car, is that when you push it to the floor, you can't just ease your foot off and have it come back again. If you push it to the floor, it stays there for at least 4 weeks. Now, it takes about 2 weeks for the first cases that result from relaxations to turn into hospitalizations. It takes another 2 weeks for those hospitalizations to turn into deaths, and probably a further week for us to take note of the statistics. By the time 4 weeks have passed, given that cases are doubling every 2 weeks and therefore lagging, hospitalizations and deaths will too. By the time 4 weeks have passed, we can assume that the numbers will all have quadrupled. But it's much worse than that, because at that point, even if the government took immediate remedial action, the next 4 weeks' deaths numbers are already in the system. The infections have occurred and the hospitalizations and the deaths, the overall numbers are now inevitable. Of course, doctors and nurses will do everything they can to save the lives of all the people that are in their care, but we know how the statistics work. The hospitalizations and deaths will follow. By 4 weeks' time from now, the numbers will have quadrupled. By another 4 weeks, they'll potentially quadruple again to 16 times. Now, the only thing that most definitely limits them is population size. So will 50,000 cases per day now turn into 800,000 cases per day by the time we get to the end of that period? Possibly not. But it is very clear that the modelers have got no idea what that limit actually is. So 100,000 cases per day was picked out of the air as to maybe we can cope with that. There's a lie at the heart of this, spoken by Boris Johnson. He said the link between cases and deaths and hospitalizations has been severed. It hasn't been severed, it's been weakened. Now, some lies are really dangerous. And the problem is that the policy, that what we're actually doing, is as if that lie was true. So that lie is going to cause a lot of deaths, or acting on the basis of that lie. One thing that is irreversible is the effect of opening up, the relaxations. Even if in 4 weeks' time the government completely reversed everything that's been relaxed on the so-called Freedom Day of July the 19th, then that would not bring us back to today's situation, because we then have a much larger a base of infected people, many more people in whom variants can evolve. There's an enormous range of variation in the numbers that the modelers are predicting. They have to produce the models, they have to predict some numbers, but it's very clear they have got no idea how many could it be. 100,000 a day, that seemed dreadful when it was first mentioned. 200,000, Neil Ferguson has said it could be. 400,000. They really have no idea. And the reason that they have no idea is because they can't, at the moment, accurately predict how people will behave. This is behavioural science or behavioural observation emerging. And that's why the relaxations shouldn't have been made or shouldn't have been done all at once. Some factors should have been relaxed, such as the social distancing, so that it was possible to measure the impact of that and then see whether to go further. The government asked, if not now, then when? If you don't want to jump off the cliff now, when do you want to jump off the cliff? Sorry, wrong question. Well, my preference, rather than jumping off the cliff now or at some later point, is to take the sensible and safe path down the cliff. So Independent Sage pointed out as well, they were trying to box us into the choice between two options that were both bad. Patrick Vallance at the podium on the announcement of relaxation looked to me like somebody in a hostage situation, forced to make a video and trying to give clues to the viewers that not all was well. We're back, in effect, to stay alert. And last year, that was a uselessly ineffective slogan. Now, hands, face, mask, space, that all still makes sense. And the more that we do that, the less opportunity that we're giving for the virus to mutate. Somebody said the end of the pandemic does not mean that the end of restrictions does not mean the end of the pandemic. It does not mean that the pandemic is now over. When this was first posted a few weeks ago, it was saying it means that they now have room for you in intensive care. It's a good warning. I don't think it's actually true anymore. I don't think they will have room for everybody in intensive care. Last year, it would have been politically unacceptable to say intensive care will be rationed according to where it will be most effective. Older people won't necessarily get it. This would have all been politically unacceptable. After the experience of working with intensive care wards stretched so much that the care wasn't intensive, the government have seen that it may not be politically acceptable to announce a policy of rationing intensive care, but in practice, that's what happens. And in my mind, that's why they're more gung-ho about saying the NHS will cope with whatever it's thrown at it. That is dreadful operational management or health management and so on. But this is from a government who have very little experience running anything. They can pile pressure onto the NHS without any significant understanding of what will happen. Our best protection against all this at the moment is the double jab vaccination. All this relaxation could have been done at a point at which far more people were double vaccinated. The limit on how bad this will get is the population size that are vulnerable. So that's those who are not double vaccinated, and the small percentage who've had the double vaccine where that is not effective, because the vaccine is not 100% effective, average 94%. So 6% of tens of millions of double vaccinated people is still a lot of people. So there are still a large number of vulnerable people. This could all have been delayed until that number was much smaller. And the really scary news is that if we're going to have, as seems now inevitable, millions and millions of COVID cases, then that gives greater opportunity for the vaccine to mutate. And then it is not just those who are, largely those who are not double vaccinated, plus a few percentage of those who are vulnerable. It's the whole population. That's the path that our government has set us on. Right? Britannia waives the rules again. Boris Johnson describes life as he would pretend it to be, not as it is, and takes us all into his experiment that will kill thousands and thousands of us and leave thousands of thousands more with long COVID. It didn't have to be like this. As I said at the beginning, if you think that anything that I've said here is inaccurate or is not a correct prediction, not a reasonable prediction, do let me know in the comments. Thank you.